Okay, Leader Kolb, thank you very much for joining us today.
Always a pleasure.
You look awake, fresh. I'm surprised. I should have noticed this gigantic coffee that you have with you. What time exactly did you guys get done last night?
Well, we, shall we say, left the chamber at about a little after 4 a.m. And by the time I got back to my hotel and tried to decompress, it was, by the time I even got my eyes closed, I think it was around quarter after 5:30 this morning. And so it was a long night. Business wasn't completed, as you know, and of course we didn't do anything on the budget deficit, as you know. And certainly, again, I think that this is exactly what people rail against Albany, is the inefficiency, the way the place is run. It's just not good government, and but we have to deal with it because, you know, we have to deal with it.
It even actually got to the point where the Assembly Democrats, a number of them had sort of jumped ship, right? There were about maybe 30 or so people who had left early, and that they were coming to you, the leadership, and asking you guys for votes. Is that correct? Well,
yes, they certainly were saying, hey, we'd like to get this bill passed, and I said, well, I'm not going to tell my members how to vote. So if there's members that were going to vote no or yes, whatever it is, I'm not going to try to deliver votes because members of the Assembly Democrat Conference decided to go home early and catch more sleep than the rest of us that were still there in the chamber. So certainly I think that you have a responsibility. I don't like being there at 4 o'clock in the morning, but you're getting paid to be here. And the Assembly Democrats that left the chamber, or anybody that left the chamber for that part, should have a responsibility to stay.
It was on the NYC OTB bailout bill in particular that we're talking about, the New York City bailout bill. Do you know, eventually it was not brought up or yanked from the floor because there weren't sufficient votes to pass it. Do you know if your members would have passed it?
Well, first of all, I think the bill would, if you had everybody there that was in Albany, it showed up and voted, yeah, I think the bill would have passed. Mm-hmm. Certainly, I think they just did not have enough yes votes because, quite frankly, depending upon where you live in the state, there were some people that, Democrats and Republicans alike, that did not like the bill.
Well, the horsemen aren't particularly thrilled with it, some of them.
Some of them are, some of them aren't. But certainly some of the Suffolk County and Nassau County folks feel that their OTBs are being left out in the cold.
Right.
And so they were voting against it for that particular reason as well. So that's why you had the problem that they had in terms of passing the bill.
You know, what's weird, though, is that the Assembly Speaker, Sheldon Silver, said this is a special session and there should be no one-house bills. And then, as we saw, the Assembly Democrats were going to try, I believe today that they probably will, yet again, try to pass the OTB bill. That's a one-house bill. The Senate Democrats did not want to pass that bill for whatever reason, and the Republicans didn't think that it was, didn't feel any particular immediacy, despite the fact that the administration and officials at OTB say they're going to shut this down by Friday.
Well, exactly. And so what happens now? I mean, is it because then you put the onus on the Senate Democrats for not showing up or not putting the bill through to get their votes? I mean, this is a classic case of, first of all, we shouldn't be doing anything here unless we know that there's sufficient votes to pass legislation.
So should there have been a special session at all, in your opinion?
In my opinion, no. You know, I think the only question is, did we really need to do a bill for the Race to the Top money and the education money? I still get differing opinions on that, whether we did have to do it by December 31st or not. But again, unless you had enough substance to work on, we shouldn't have been here to call everybody back.
One thing that did pass both houses was this Judicial Pay Raise Commission. I actually was surprised because I thought that state lawmakers would never want to decouple their raises from judicial raises. Apparently that is not in fact the case. Are you hearing any murmurs at all about legislative pay raises?
No, none whatsoever. I think it would be really dumb to even contemplate a legislative pay raise, especially in the times that we're in. And even with the Judicial Commission, it sets up the commission, but there's nothing that goes into effect. There's no retroactive pay increases in the current coming year.
Until 2012, actually.
Correct. So I think that in itself carried the day more than normal. But certainly, I'm glad that there wasn't any legislative pay raises being discussed.
You know, the thing is here, though, particularly in the Senate, but also some in the Assembly, there's this pitch being made now for bipartisanship. Let's put the elections behind us. Let's work together, move forward. It's going to be a difficult year in 2011, et cetera. Much the same sort of mantra that we're hearing from the Democrats coming out of Washington, D.C. in the wake of big Republican wins. Do you think when you talk about people who are tired, New Yorkers are tired of seeing this kind of gridlock, don't the Republicans in the Assembly, in your case, bear any responsibility, despite the fact that you don't control what goes on in the chamber?
Well, when you say, don't we bear some responsibility?
For when things don't get done, for example.
Well, of course, we certainly try to cooperate as much as possible. Like last night, we tried to accelerate the process of getting legislation done while we were all there. And that's behind the scenes, that's inside baseball sort of thing, but we were trying to cooperate as much with the Assembly to get the votes taken. However we voted, but we were still trying to be helpful to keep the process moving.
So you're not there until 4 in the morning is the point,
correct,
right?
and we've always done that, is tried to work with the majority. We have our debates, we have our votes, but we try to be cooperative to make sure that the institution works. But unfortunately, again, it doesn't mean that from a process perspective, it can't work better than it did. My comment was we could have worked till midnight last night, or even 1 o'clock in the morning, came back today, finished up during the daylight hours when everybody's fresh and everybody's there, and then the votes will be what the votes are. So we've always cooperated with the majority. The only thing we've disagreed upon is on the debates on the merits of public policy, which we'll continue to do. And but you know, that's our responsibility to do that.
Where do you stand right now in terms of these outstanding races? Because last I checked, there were 1 or 2 that were still hanging in the balance, and it makes a decision, it makes a difference in between a veto-proof majority for the Dems and a non-veto-proof majority for the Dems.
Well, right now there's 2 seats outstanding. One of them is our incumbent, Bob Castelli from Westchester County. They're counting absentee ballots as we speak right now. There's still probably close to 800-900 ballots to be counted, including affidavits. Bob Castelli has a lead, I think, of around 170 votes right now, but you know, until they get through all the absentee ballots, plus there's the disputed ballots that have been set aside.
Right.
Hopefully we'll get all those ballots, at least on the first round, counted by the end of the week. The other seat is a Democrat, Frank Skartatis, down in the Hudson Valley. Tom Kerwin, the Republican challenger, is up right now by about 130 votes, with about, I think, around 270 votes to be counted. Hopefully we'll know by the end of today, tomorrow at the latest, as far as on the first brush through how many ballots have been set aside for, shall we say, the courts to settle, because they're both going to be very, very close.
You know, the Assembly Speaker in an interview with me actually down in Puerto Rico suggested that this whole question of a veto-proof majority was actually sort of a red herring and not real, because generally speaking, when there have been overrides, there are Republicans who vote with the Democrats. I mean, it's generally been bipartisan in the past.
Generally, as far as a normal rule of thumb, you're going to have does the veto-proof majority or minority come into play on a regular basis? The answer is no. But periodically it could. And I think regardless, and that's why I've tried to tell people, whether we're at 49, 50, or 51, I think the most important thing is, of all the legislative conferences, the Assembly Republican Conference took back 8 Democrat seats, possibly 9 when the absentee ballots are counted. That has a totally new dynamic now within the chamber, just like last night, or on committees, because we'll have greater committee presence. So I think it's more of the internal impact that's going to have on debates and votes and committee votes, especially in the normal process of legislation. Will the veto override come into play? Who knows? It may not, because then it would take 2/3 majority of both houses to override.
Yeah,
it.
and you can't get 2/3 of anything in the Senate, most likely. Even if the Republicans do take it 32-30, you have the same situation that you had with the Democrats in control. And I've had a number of incoming members say to me here, sure, Republicans and Democrats, I'll hold up the whole process if I think it's going to benefit my constituents.
Correct, and that's what's been done, and that's what will be interesting, assuming that the Senate Republicans, I understand that Antoine Thompson today conceded, so the last race to be determined is Craig Johnson down in Nassau County.
Right.
So if the Republicans take that, they're back in power. But they're now, how are they going to maintain discipline in their conference? Because they have some new members, and that's what's going to be a very interesting new dynamic. Can the Senate Republicans maintain discipline?
Let me ask you this, though. Well, first of all, do you think they can?
I have no idea.
But it's going to be Dean Skelos again, of course. So, I mean, it's not like he's just new and to the leadership role. He's done it before.
Correct, but I think what, good, bad, or indifferent, I think what some of these folks in the new majority would be Senate Republicans to say, well, if I can muck up the work, so to speak, to get something for me or for my district, maybe I'll just exercise that. And I don't know if that will be a bearing or not. Certainly, I think that's what the Senate Democrats did, and I don't think it worked out very well for them. And so that's why I think it's going to be a whole new dynamic for Senator Skelos and his conference on how they're going to deal with that.
Right. Sometimes it's not so bad to be the leader of the smallest conference. You don't have these kind of problems. You are, though, because you have some clout gained from the seats that you managed to get. Have you spoken to Andrew Cuomo of late?
The last time I talked to the governor-elect was when he asked me to serve on the Transition Committee for Economic Development. We had a great chat, and he said we have a lot of similar agendas in terms of fixing the state fiscally. And I said, yes, we're not going to be your problem. The Assembly Democrats are going to be your problem.
And wait, what did he say to that?
He was silent, which I would expect him to be.
Right.
But everyone in Albany knows is that the Assembly Democrat Conference have been the biggest problem in terms of trying to move the state forward and trying to rein in spending, rein in taxes, having a sound economic development policy. New York City agenda has driven the legislative agenda there. So really, how does Governor-elect Cuomo manage that next year? Now, I know he's going to meet with them today.
He's lunching with them today, yeah.
But my point is, Governor Patterson couldn't get it done. Governor Spitzer couldn't get it done. Now, what will Governor-elect Cuomo do to get it done with the Assembly when they have not been interested in reducing spending, when they have been beholden to special interests, when they have been for new taxes and fees to the tune of $10 billion?
Do you think he can?
I'm hoping that he can. I want him to succeed because our state needs it. And I think that we'll do whatever we can to help fix the state, and that's why I hope Governor Cuomo is very successful.
Well, we shall see. In the meantime, Assembly Minority Leader Brian Kolb, I want to thank you.